This isn't a toy show, old-timer. This is a United States Marine Corps range. The voice was sharp, honed by the parade ground and laced with the casual arrogance of youth. Sergeant Cade, whose jaw seemed carved from the same granite as the nearby hills of Camp Pendleton, stared down at the old man. He gestured with a contemptuous flick of his chin toward the rifle case in the man's weathered hands. Whatever is in that ridiculous bag, I can guarantee it doesn't belong here. This is the Allerine Long Range Invitational. Professionals only. The old man said nothing. He simply looked up, his eyes a pale, washed-out blue that seemed to hold the memory of vast, empty skies. His face was a roadmap of hard years, his clothes worn and faded, and he carried the quiet, unassuming posture of someone trying to take up as little space in the world as possible. He looked, Cade thought with a sneer, homeless. He offered a folded, slightly crumpled entry form. Cade snatched it from his hand. Silas Kane, he read aloud, his voice dripping with theatrical disbelief. He glanced back at the rifle case, a garish, bright orange plastic shell that looked more suited to a child's Nerf gun than a precision instrument. "All right, Silas Kane, let's see the weapon." With slow, deliberate movements, Silas unlatched the case. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay a rifle that drew a collective snort from the young Marines gathering around. The stock and chassis were the same jarring safety orange as the case. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a firearm, a custom bolt-action receiver mated to a heavily modified barrel and a scope that looked older than Cade himself. "What in God's name is that?" one of the younger Marines whispered, failing to stifle a laugh. Cade smirked, his authority swelling in the warmth of his audience's derision. "Looks like something you'd use to shoot traffic cones, Pops. You know the minimum caliber is .308, right? That thing doesn't shoot plastic darts, does it?" Silas's hands, gnarled and scarred, gently lifted the rifle. He didn't seem to hear them. His touch was reverent, familiar. He ran a thumb along the cold steel of the bolt. "She do," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble like stones shifting deep underground. It was a statement of fact, not a defense. This quiet confidence, this utter lack of reaction to their mockery, infuriated Cade more than any angry retort could have. He saw it as defiance. He saw it as a challenge to his world, a world of spit-shine boots, crisp uniforms, and unquestioned hierarchies. This old man with his junkyard rifle and his weary eyes was a glitch in that perfect system, and Cade was determined to correct it. The safety briefing was an exercise in targeted humiliation. Sergeant Cade paced before the line of shooters, all of them a picture of military and law enforcement perfection in their tactical gear and branded apparel. Their rifles were sleek, black, and expensive instruments of modern warfare. And then there was Silas, a faded photograph in a digital world, his orange rifle a beacon of absurdity. "Listen up," Cade barked, his eyes finding Silas immediately. "On my range we have standards. We use professional equipment." He pointed directly at Silas's rifle, propped on its bipod. "We do not use repurposed construction tools or hunting rifles. You won in a raffle at the local VFW. Your weapon is an extension of your discipline. If it looks like a joke, chances are so are you." A ripple of laughter went through the line. Silas remained impassive, his gaze fixed on the distant targets, shimmering like silver coins in the California heat. He seemed to be in a different place entirely, a place where the jeers of a young sergeant were as meaningless as the buzz of a fly. From a small tower overlooking the firing line, Gunnery Sergeant Miller watched through a pair of binoculars. He was a lifer, a man whose skin had been cured by the suns of a dozen different war zones. He'd seen every kind of shooter imaginable, from the cocky prodigies to the seasoned veterans. He saw the overt bullying from Cade, and it annoyed him. But he was watching the old man. He saw the economy of his movements, no wasted energy. He saw the way his eyes scanned the wind flags, not with a glance, but with a deep, analytical stare. He saw the way the old man's hands rested on the rifle, not holding it, but becoming a part of it. There was a stillness to him, a core of absolute calm that the noisy world couldn't penetrate. Miller zoomed in, focusing on the collar of Silas's worn flannel jacket. There, almost lost in the faded fabric, was a small pin. It was tarnished and dull, no bigger than a thumbnail. The insignia was obscure, a design Miller hadn't seen in decades, a ghost, a mountain, and a single star. A cold knot formed in his stomach. It was a unit that didn't officially exist. A ghost unit for ghost soldiers. His hand instinctively went to his phone. Not yet, he told himself. Let's see what happens. But the seed of a terrible, awe-inspiring suspicion had been planted. He was no longer watching a homeless man. He was watching a phantom. The command to commence firing echoed across the range. The first stage was 800 yards, a simple warm-up for the professionals assembled. A symphony of powerful cracks filled the air as the shooters began sending rounds downrange. Cade stood behind the line, arms crossed, a smug look on his face as he waited for the inevitable comical failure from the old man with the orange rifle. Silas settled into his prone position, his movements fluid, a slow-motion ballet of practiced efficiency that belied his age. He adjusted the bipod, settled the stock into the pocket of his shoulder, and reached for the bolt. The sound of it cycling was unnervingly smooth, a slick metallic shink-shunk that spoke of thousands upon thousands of repetitions. It was the sound of pure mechanical intimacy. The sharp, acrid smell of burnt cordite from the neighboring rifles drifted over him. It caught in his nostrils, a familiar perfume that acted as a key. Unlocking the door in his mind, he tried to keep bolted shut. The dusty range at Pendleton melted away. He was on a high ridge in the Cooner province, the air thin and cold. The smell was the same, but mixed with the scent of pine and fear. The rifle in his hands was not orange, but a drab earth-colored prototype, its metal cold against his cheek. His spotter's voice was a low murmur in his ear, calling out windage, elevation, the frantic pulse of the men they were protecting 1,000 meters below. The weight of it all, the lives balanced on the microscopic twitch of his index finger, settled over him. He blinked, and the memory receded, leaving only a ghost of its pressure behind. He was back in the California sun. He took a breath, let half of it out, and the world narrowed to the reticle in his scope. The trigger broke like a shard of glass. The rifle bucked, a familiar and comforting jolt. He cycled the bolt, his eyes never leaving the scope, and fired again and again, 3 shots in 10 seconds. Downrange, the electronic target system registered the hits. 3 holes appeared on the monitor for all to see, clustered so tightly together in the dead center of the bullseye, they could be covered by a dime. A hush fell over the shooters nearest to him. The snickering had evaporated, replaced by confused, grudging respect. Cade's smirk faltered. He strode over to the monitor, staring at the impossible grouping. It wasn't just good. It was perfect, machine-like. He looked from the screen to the old man, who was already staring back down his scope as if the 3 miraculous shots had been nothing more than a clearing of his throat. Cade's annoyance curdled into suspicion. Nobody was that good, not with that equipment. It had to be a trick. Cease fire. Cease fire on lane 7. He barked into his radio, his voice tight. He marched over to Silas's firing position, his boots crunching on the gravel with aggressive intent. The old man slowly looked up, his expression unreadable. "All right, Grandpa. What's the gimmick?" Cade demanded, standing over him. "Is that some kind of computerized smart scope? Are you using some kind of illegal ammunition?" Silas didn't answer. He simply looked at Cade, his pale eyes holding a profound and unnerving stillness. Cade felt a flicker of unease, a sense that he was wading into waters far deeper than he understood. He pushed it down, doubling down on his authority. "Let me see that rifle." He reached down, his hand about to grab the orange stock. Silas's hand moved not fast, but with undeniable finality covering the receiver. "No," he said. The word was soft, but it landed with the weight of a slab of granite. It was not a request. It was a command. For a split second, the power dynamic on the range shifted. The young, powerful sergeant was frozen by the quiet refusal of a frail old man. The moment passed. Cade flushed with anger. "This is my range, old man. I will inspect any weapon I deem unsafe or illegal." He gestured to the rifle. "What is this thing anyway? Looks like you bolted it together from spare parts you found at the dump." Silas finally relented, lifting his hand. His gaze drifted back toward the distant targets. "She works," he said, the simple statement carrying an ocean of unspoken history. Cade, seething at the public challenge to his command, snatched one of Silas's loaded cartridges from the ammo box beside him. He inspected the hand-loaded round. It was perfectly seated, the brass gleaming. It was legal meticulously, flawlessly legal. Frustrated and looking for a way to reassert his dominance, he stalked back to the central podium and grabbed the microphone for the PA system. His voice boomed across the facility. "Attention on the firing line. It seems we have a true magician in our midst in Lane 7. Apparently, Mr. Kane here has some kind of magic bullets. Let's see if they work at 1,200 yards. His words were thick with sarcasm, but they had the opposite effect he intended. Every eye on the range now turned to Silas, not with mockery, but with tense, expectant curiosity. The joke was no longer funny. It was becoming a legend. The competition wore on, the distances stretching further and further. 1,200 yards, 1,500 yards, a mile. At each stage, the field of competitors thinned as the challenge surpassed their skill or the capability of their equipment. But Silas did not falter. Shot after shot, his strange orange rifle sent bullets across the vast expanse with preternatural accuracy. His movements never changed. His expression remained a mask of calm concentration. He was no longer just a competitor. He was a phenomenon. The other shooters, a collection of the Marine Corps' most elite snipers and seasoned law enforcement marksmen, began to watch him with a kind of reverence. They saw the subtle way he read the mirage, the almost imperceptible adjustments he made for temperature and spin drift. They were witnessing a masterclass, and the teacher was a silent old man they had laughed at only hours before. Sergeant Cade's world was crumbling. His best shooters, men he had personally trained, were being systematically and effortlessly defeated by a vagrant with a ridiculous rifle. His authority was a joke, his arrogance exposed as ignorance with every perfect shot Silas made. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot coal in his gut. He had to end this. He had to break the old man to prove that his success was a fluke, a trick of the light that would vanish under a truly impossible test. He strode to the microphone, his face a thunderous mask. "All right, that concludes the official competition," he announced, his voice strained. "But we're going to have a little exhibition before we hand out the awards." He paused for dramatic effect. "Range control, I want a bonus target. Set it on the far western ridge." The range controller's voice crackled back over the radio, confused. "Sergeant, that's over 4,000 meters out. We don't even have a target stand rated for that distance." "Use the old tank Hulk," Cade snapped. "And I want a spotter with a high-powered scope out there to confirm the hit. We're going to see what the old-timer's toy can really do when faced with a real challenge." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. 4,100 meters, over 2.5 miles. It was a ludicrous distance, a shot that belonged in mythology, not practical marksmanship. It was beyond the capability of any rifle on the line, especially a .3008. This wasn't an exhibition. It was a public execution designed to force Silas into a spectacular and definitive failure. Cade smirked, his confidence returning. Let the old man's magic bullets try to fly that far. From his tower, Gunny Miller lowered his binoculars, his knuckles white. He had seen enough. This act of blatant, cruel pride from Cade was the final straw. He finally knew what he had to do. The pin on the old man's jacket wasn't just an insignia. It was a key to a forgotten chapter of military history, a chapter written in blood and secrecy. For a sergeant to unknowingly try to humiliate the man who wrote that chapter was more than an insult. It was a sacrilege. Miller pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over a name he hadn't contacted in nearly a decade. It was a direct line, a privilege granted to him after a particularly nasty engagement in Fallujah, a number for emergencies only. He considered this an emergency of the highest order, an emergency of honor. He pressed the call button. The voice on the other end was crisp, powerful, and instantly recognizable. "This is Maddox." "General," Miller said, his own voice tight with urgency. "It's Gunnery Sergeant Miller, sir, from the 3rd Battalion." "Miller, it's been a long time." "What is it?" "Sir, you need to get to the long-range facility at Pendleton, range 117, right now." There was a pause. "What's the situation, Gunny?" Miller took a deep breath. "They're about to crucify a ghost, sir." He quickly explained everything, the old man. The orange rifle, the impossible shooting. The arrogant young sergeant, and the final absurd challenge of a 4,100-meter shot. He described the pin. "Sir, it's the insignia for Task Force Nomad, the mountain unit." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, profound. When General Maddox spoke again, his voice was transformed. The calm authority was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly fury. "I'm 20 minutes out. Keep him there, Miller. Do not let him leave. And do not, under any circumstances, let them disrespect him further. Is that understood?" "Crystal clear, General," Miller replied. He hung up the phone, a grim satisfaction settling over him. The cavalry was coming. Down on the line, Silas had accepted the challenge without a word. He was once again prone behind his rifle, an island of tranquility in a sea of tension. He was making his calculations, preparing to attempt the impossible. Miller watched, knowing he was about to witness either a miracle or a tragedy, and that either way, a reckoning was screaming down the highway. Silas lay on the dusty earth, the familiar weight of the orange rifle a comfort against his shoulder. He ignored the whispers of the crowd, the smug anticipation radiating from Sergeant Cade. None of it mattered. There was only the rifle, the air, and a target he couldn't even see with his naked eye. He closed his eyes and the world fell away. The scent of the dry California dirt was replaced by the thin metallic smell of the air above the tree line. The memory was not a gentle visitor. It was an invading force. He was back in the Hindu Kush, perched on a razorback ridge that he and his spotter had spent 3 days climbing to reach. Below them, a company of rangers was pinned down in a narrow valley, a Taliban heavy machine gun nest on the opposing cliff face tearing them to shreds. They were too far for air support to target effectively, and the rangers couldn't move. The nest was at a range his spotter had calculated 3 times, refusing to believe the number 4,127 meters, an impossible distance. Their mission was observation, not engagement, but he could hear the desperate screams over the radio, the rhythmic, murderous chatter of the DSHK. The company commander's voice was panicked. "We're being cut to pieces. We can't hold." He had made a decision. He had broken every rule. He had used an experimental rifle with experimental ammunition that no one else believed in. He had taken the shot. He remembered the endless calculations, the agonizing wait as the bullet traversed miles of treacherous air, the silent prayer he offered to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. He remembered the result. He opened his eyes, Pendleton, 4,100 meters. The target was the rusted hulk of an old M60 tank. He began his work. He wet his finger and held it up, not for the wind's direction, but for its feel, its texture. He watched the mirage, the heat shimmer that distorted the air, reading its subtle dance like a language only he understood. He pulled a well-worn Kestrel weather meter from his pocket, noting the humidity, the barometric pressure, the density altitude. He murmured the numbers to himself, plugging them into an equation that existed only in his mind. He adjusted the turrets on his ancient scope, the clicks precise and audible in the dead silence that had fallen over the range. The crowd held its breath. Cade stood with his arms crossed, a condescending grin fixed on his face. Silas settled in, his breathing slowing until it was barely perceptible. He exhaled, his finger taking up the slack on the trigger. The world disappeared. There was only the crosshair. The rifle cracked, a single sharp report that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before echoing off the distant hills. The wait began. 10 seconds, 15, 20, an agonizingly long flight time for a bullet traveling over 2.5 miles. A sound returned. It was not the sharp crack of the rifle, but a faint, tiny ping, a metallic note carried back across the immense distance by the sensitive microphones placed near the target. A hit, a confirmed hit. A collective gasp went through the crowd as if it were a single organism. People stared at the monitor in disbelief, where the spotter's camera zoomed in on the tank hulk. There, clear as day, was a fresh gleaming scar on the turret, exactly where the crosshairs would have been. Cade's face went slack, the color draining from it. His smug grin dissolved into a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. At that precise moment, a new sound intruded, the high-pitched whine of tires on asphalt, moving far too fast. A black government-issue SUV with flags mounted on its fenders came roaring down the range road, kicking up a plume of dust. It screeched to a halt just behind the firing line, and the passenger door flew open. A man emerged, and the air on the range instantly changed. He was tall, immaculate in his uniform, with 4 stars glittering on his collar. It was General Robert Maddox, the commanding officer of the Marine Expeditionary Force. His face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. He strode onto the firing line, his eyes scanning the crowd until they locked on Silas, who was slowly, stiffly getting to his feet. Cade jolted out of his stupor and rushed forward, snapping a clumsy salute. "General Maddox, sir, an unexpected honor. We were just conducting an exhibition." Maddox walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. He didn't slow his pace or glance at the sergeant. His entire universe had narrowed to the old man in the faded flannel jacket. He stopped 2 feet in front of Silas, his posture ramrod straight. The 4-star general, one of the most powerful men in the Marine Corps, looked at the quiet, unassuming veteran. Then, in front of the entire assembly of stunned Marines, General Maddox executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his career, a gesture of ultimate respect. A subordinate saluting a superior, though no rank insignia on Silas's jacket demanded it. The general held the salute, his gaze unwavering. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Silas Kane," General Maddox's voice boomed, sharp and clear across the silent range. "It is an honor to see you again, sir." The words detonated in the silence. "Master Gunnery Sergeant, sir." The collective shock was palpable. Cade's jaw dropped, his mind struggling to reconcile the homeless-looking old man with the revered rank and the general's deferential tone. Maddox dropped his salute and turned, his eyes finally falling upon Sergeant Cade. If his look at Silas was reverence, his gaze upon Cade was pure, unadulterated fury. "Sergeant," he began, his voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper more terrifying than a shout, "do you have any earthly idea who you have spent the day mocking?" Cade was speechless. "You stand there on a range named after heroes, wearing a uniform earned by giants. And you use your unearned authority to humiliate a man to whom you owe the very ground you stand on." The general stepped closer, his voice rising with righteous indignation. "This man is a living legend. He is the man they called the ghost of the Cooner Valley. He is a phantom the enemy still tells stories about, a man who held back entire enemy advances by himself." He pointed at the orange rifle Silas held loosely. "You see that rifle? That toy? That is the XR-41, the experimental platform for Project Chimera, and that safety orange is its original prototype color. It was the only one ever made. He was the only man who could make it do the impossible. And with that rifle on a ridge in Afghanistan in 2009, he made a shot at 4,127 meters to save an entire company of Army Rangers from being overrun. A shot the Pentagon officially denies because the physics are considered impossible. A shot he just replicated for your entertainment." The general turned to the crowd. "Every sniper in this course has studied his work without knowing his name. The chapters in your marksmanship manuals on extreme environmental compensation, on transonic destabilization, that's him. That's his data, bought with his blood and his solitude. You are not fit to polish his boots, let alone judge his equipment." The weight of the general's words crushed Cade. He looked at Silas and finally saw him not a frail old man, but the ghost of the Cooner Valley, the quiet professional who had done the impossible and asked for nothing. Shame flooded him. He stumbled forward, trembling. "Master Gunnery Sergeant." "Sir, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. My conduct was unforgivable." General Maddox continued, voice now like a historian reciting a sacred truth. "After that mission, he was offered every medal we could give him, the Navy Cross, the Medal of Honor. He refused them all. He said he was no hero, just a tool the nation needed for a dirty job. He walked away from the corps, seeking a quiet life, trying to forget the things he'd had to do, the men he'd had to kill from miles away. He asked only to keep the rifle. It seems it's the only companion he has left." The story hung in the air, a testament to sacrifice and humility. Silas looked at the broken sergeant. There was no anger, only deep, weary sadness. He rested a hand on the orange stock of his rifle. "The rifle doesn't care who's holding it, son," Silas said quietly, his voice carrying immense gravity. "And the bullet doesn't know the difference between a hero and a monster. All that matters is the man behind them and the responsibility he carries. You wear that uniform. That's a heavy responsibility. Don't ever treat it lightly." He gave a simple nod, a gesture of forgiveness more powerful than any reprimand. The general placed a hand on Silas's shoulder and guided him toward the waiting SUV, treating him as a national treasure. As they walked away, one Marine, then another, then the entire range slowly came to attention, offering a heartfelt salute to the old man and his orange rifle as they drove away. Sergeant Cade remained on the firing line, a changed man. The echo of the impossible shot and the weight of a quiet hero's grace settled over him, teaching him a lesson he would carry for life. True honor is quiet. True strength needs no announcement, and true greatness often passes unseen.